get it to go. All of a sudden, that's 6 of 10. Not looking so hot anymore, and the baseball pass down court, passing. Look at this.
This is a pass that not very many players can make from behind the free throw line on.
After 239 days off the court, Caitlin Clark is stepping back into the spotlight. Not a highlight reel, not a redemption arc. What you are about to watch is a breakdown of coaching, of control, and of what happens when a system either works with a generational talent or refuses to. 5 games, 2 coaching philosophies, 1 undeniable outcome, and by the time this video is over, the scoreboard, the statistics, and a trophy are all going to agree on exactly what that outcome was. Stay with me, because the numbers in this story do not just tell you what happened, they tell you why it had to happen. Let's start with where Caitlin Clark was before San Juan even existed as a location on her calendar. The ankle. If you followed the Indiana Fever season at all, you already know that the ankle injury that kept her off the court was not a minor inconvenience. It was the kind of extended absence that derails momentum, disrupts rhythm, and for most players, forces a long rebuilding process before they look like themselves again. 239 days. That is not a few weeks of rest and rehab. That is most of a year. That is an entire off season plus. That is the kind of layoff that makes front offices nervous, that makes analysts hedge their language, that makes even the most committed fans start to wonder whether the version of a player they fell in love with is still intact on the other side of that recovery. So when USA Basketball named Clark to the squad heading to the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico in March of 2026. And the question that followed her onto that court was not just about basketball. It was about whether the layoff had taken something from her, whether the ankle had taken something from her, whether 239 days away from competitive basketball had quietly eroded the thing that made her different from every other player on the floor. That question was going to get answered in San Juan. It just was not going to get answered the way anyone expected. And the reason it was not going to be answered the way anyone expected is because the tournament accidentally became something more than a qualifying event. It became a controlled experiment. It became a case study. It became 5 games of evidence that when you line them up next to each other and read the numbers in sequence, tell a story about talent and system and coaching philosophy that goes well beyond one player and one tournament. It became the kind of data set that front offices pay consultants enormous amounts of money to produce, delivered for free in real time on a basketball court in Puerto Rico in March of 2026. Before we get to the numbers, before we get to the coaching decisions, before we get to the controversy, I need you to hear something that Caitlin Clark said before this tournament began. She said, and I am paraphrasing here, that she was not going to come out here and try to be the star player. She said her job was to fit in, to support her teammates, to be whatever the team needed her to be. Remember that quote. Plant it somewhere in the back of your mind right now, because we are going to come back to it. And when we do, the fact that she meant it, that genuinely, verifiably meant every word of it, is going to make everything that follows feel exactly as unfair as it actually was. Because the thing about Caitlin Clark going into that tournament with a humble mindset is that she did not need to be coached into humility. She brought it with her. And that matters more than it might seem right now. Game 1 is against Segal. Clark comes off the bench. Head coach Cheryl Lawson is working through her rotation, building chemistry, experimenting with lineups, treating this early game as part of a longer-term process of figuring out who plays well with whom and in what combinations. That is a defensible coaching philosophy. That is, in fact, how a lot of experienced coaches approach a multi-game qualifying tournament when the immediate pressure is lower and the goal is to learn something about your roster. So Clark comes off the bench, and what does she do with her 19 minutes? 17 points, 12 assists, off the bench, in 19 minutes. Just to be precise about what you are hearing, 17 points and 12 assists in less than half of a basketball game, coming off the bench after 239 days away from competitive play. The assist number is not just impressive in the context of this game or in the context of this tournament. The 12 assists Clark recorded in that performance represent the second most assists ever recorded by any player in the history of FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying. The second most ever in history off the bench, 19 minutes. After 239 days, Cheryl Lawson, to her credit, said after that game that she loved what the bench unit was doing. She specifically praised the energy that Clark and that second unit were bringing to the floor. Remember that quote too. because we are going to need it in a few minutes. Game 2 is against Puerto Rico, and this is where the story starts to complicate itself in ways that are interesting, instructive, and, depending on your perspective on how elite athletes should be deployed, quietly maddening. Puerto Rico comes into this game with a specific defensive assignment. They run a box and one. If you are not a basketball person, here is exactly what that means. 4 of Puerto Rico's defenders play a standard zone defense, forming a kind of box shape around the paint. The 5th defender is assigned exclusively, specifically, and relentlessly to Caitlin Clark. Everywhere she goes on the floor, that defender goes with her. Every screen she uses, the defender fights over or under it. Every catch she attempts, there is already a body attached to her before the ball arrives. The entire structure of Puerto Rico's defense is built around one premise: take away Clark's rhythm, take away her space, and make every possession that runs through her feel difficult and contested. That is a serious defensive adjustment. That is a game plan built specifically around respect for what she can do. That is, if you squint at it correctly, a compliment disguised as a trap. And in Game 2, it works. By Caitlin Clark's own stratospheric standards, Game 2 is a struggle. 2 of 6 from the field, 1 of 5 from 3, 2 assists. But now, and this matters, the United States wins this game by 43 points. 43. So if your instinct is to say that the coaching decisions were fine because the team kept winning, I want you to hold that thought for a second, because winning by 43 is not the point. The point is not whether USA basketball wins this tournament. Of course they are going to win this tournament. The point is whether the system they are running is getting the most out of the best player on the floor. Those are different questions. After the game, Coach Lawson is asked about the box and one. She is asked about Clark's numbers. She gives an answer that, when you transcribe it and look at it without the cadence of a post-game press conference softening it, does not actually address the question at all. Whoa, it is the kind of answer that organizations give when they have made a decision and do not want to explain it, or when they have not yet fully diagnosed the problem their decision is creating. Now, here is the part I need you to really sit with. Even with Game 2 dragging her shooting splits down, even with a dedicated defender attached to her all night, even with 2 assists instead of 12, even with the box and one doing exactly what Puerto Rico designed it to do, Caitlin Clark still leads Team USA in overall efficiency across the first 2 games of this tournament. She is still the most efficient player on the floor, despite being the most heavily defended player on the floor. That is a stat that coaches the coach. The team is running a system that restricts its most efficient player, and the argument for changing that system is sitting right there in the data, visible to anyone willing to look at it directly. Here is where I need to be precise, because the internet is going to run away with a version of this story that is more dramatic than what actually happened, and the actual version is already dramatic enough. Cheryl Lawson did not get fired. She did not disappear under mysterious circumstances. She did not have a falling out with USA Basketball's front office over Caitlin Clark specifically. What happened is that Lawson had a prior commitment, a conflict that had been on the calendar before this tournament began, that required her to step away after Game 2. The assistant coach, Charles Tibbetts, stepped into the head coaching role for Games 3, 4, and 5. That transition was planned. It was orderly. And it is the hinge on which this entire story turns, because what Tibbetts did the moment he took over is so direct, so clear, and so immediately consequential that it is almost startling in its simplicity. His very first move, he puts Caitlin Clark in the starting lineup. That is it. That is the decision, not a press conference, not a formal announcement of a philosophical shift, not a detailed breakdown of what Lawson did wrong and what Tibbetts plans to do differently. Just a lineup card with a different name at the top of it. No complicated system overhaul, no new offensive scheme drawn up overnight, no dramatic team meeting or motivational speech. He looks at the roster, he looks at the data from the first 2 games, and he puts Caitlin Clark, the most efficient player on the team, the player who led the entire bench unit in every meaningful metric, into the starting 5. Game 3 is against Italy. Clark starts. She goes 4 of 5 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3, 5 assists. The United States runs Italy off the floor. The plus-minus number Clark posts in this game is plus 27. Plus 27 in one game. That number is almost absurd. It means that in the minutes Caitlin Clark was on the floor against Italy, the United States outscored Italy by 27 points. It means that when she is playing, the game is not close. It means that the question of whether the system should be built around her has been answered loudly and in real time by the scoreboard itself. But here's the thing that makes the Game 3 numbers even more interesting than they look at first glance. It is not just Clark's individual stats that improve, it is everyone around her. The players who struggle to generate offense in the box and one games. Because when your most dangerous playmaker is being double teamed and the system does not have a counter, everyone's numbers suffer. Those same players start finding open shots, cleaner cuts, better spacing. Clark's ability to make reads, to draw attention and redistribute the ball, to operate in pace and space the way Tibbets' system is designed to let her, creates better basketball for the entire team. The ecosystem around her improves because she is no longer being artificially constrained inside it. That is the thing about elite playmakers at Clark's level. You do not just get what they do individually, you get what they make everyone else around them capable of doing. On Game 4 is against New Zealand. 6 of 11 from the field, 6 assists. The efficiency holds, the playmaking holds, the plus-minus holds. And then something happens in this game that I do not think got enough attention in the initial coverage. Something that quietly broadens the argument being made about Clark as a complete basketball player rather than just an offensive weapon. She gets 2 defensive steals in this game that directly lead to fast break points for Team USA. Now, the narrative around Caitlin Clark has always been offense first, and with good reason. Her scoring and playmaking numbers are what made her famous, what made her the most watched college basketball player in history, what made the WNBA attendance figures do what they did. But those 2 steals against New Zealand are a reminder that when she is playing freely, when she is not spending energy fighting through a system that does not have a designed role for her, she has enough left in the tank to be active and aggressive on the defensive end too. She is not a liability. She is not a passenger. She is a two-way player who looks like a two-way player when she is given the conditions to be one. Game 5 is against Spain. Spain is not Senegal. Spain is not Puerto Rico in a box and one hoping to survive. Spain is one of the better women's basketball programs in the world, with size, with experience, with a system of their own, and Clark goes out in Game 5 and puts together the kind of performance that, when you add it to everything that came before it, starts to feel less like a good tournament and more like a statement. I am going to hold the full tournament numbers for just another moment. Because the way they land depends on you having seen the whole arc to get here. What I want you to understand first is the shape of what just happened across 5 games in San Juan. In Games 1 and 2, under a system that used Clark as a piece rather than a pillar, you saw a limited version of what she can do. The numbers were still remarkable by any normal standard. 17 points and 12 assists off the bench in 19 minutes is not a bad game for anyone. But the system had a ceiling, and the box and one found it. In Games 3, 4, and 5, under a system that was built to let her read and react and make decisions in real time with the ball in her hands and space around her, you saw something different. You saw what she actually is when the constraints come off. 2 of 6 becomes 4 of 5 becomes 6 of 11. On 2 assists becomes 5 assists becomes 6 assists. A plus-minus of plus 27 in a single game that tells you everything you need to know about the difference one decision made. Here are the full tournament numbers. 58 total points across 5 games. 32 total assists, which led every player from every country in the entire tournament. Not just Team USA, every country, the whole field. An efficiency rating of 73. A field goal percentage of 52.9%. A 3-point percentage of 40%. 11.6 points per game, 6.4 assists per game. And at the end of it, when FIBA sat down and looked at what every player from every team had done across every game of